Bienvenido, mi nombre es Felipe Álvarez, soy vicedecano de la Facultad de Ciencias Físicas y Matemáticas de la Universidad de Chile. Les quiero dar la bienvenida a este seminario de Ingeniería y Ciencias que estamos inaugurando con este evento. En esta oportunidad contamos con un invitado especial gracias a una colaboración que estamos realizando en una alianza estratégica con el MIT y la oficina que tiene para Latinoamérica, localizada en Santiago. Esto es parte de las actividades que nosotros estamos realizando en el proyecto Una Nueva Ingeniería para el 2030 y esperamos realizar otros seminarios en esta serie que nos inviten a mirar hacia los desafíos y las oportunidades que ofrece la ciencia y la tecnología en las próximas décadas. Les quiero presentar a Lee Ullman. Lee es el encargado de la oficina de MIT en Santiago y también quiere decir algunas palabras a ustedes.
Bueno, gracias y gracias por la invitación. La idea, yo soy el director de la oficina de MIT Sloan en América Latina y la idea de la oficina es traer el conocimiento del MIT a América Latina y la oficina está ubicada acá en Santiago y que estamos tratando de hacer es trabajar conjuntos con profesores, con ideas o cosas que son importantes por la región. Entonces, como estamos trabajando mucho con la Universidad de Chile y con esta facultad, de varias cosas de emprendimiento, de innovación, una de las áreas que yo pensé y también hablamos es energía, y energía generalmente no solo para Chile, pero toda la región. Entonces, el profesor Alex Slocum es uno de los famosos de MIT por varias razones, pero él es un experto mundial de cosas de energía, de mecánica, entonces pensé que bueno para traerlo acá a la Chile para hablar con ustedes y para compartir ideas con ustedes.
Gracias, Lee. El profesor Slocum va a hacer su presentación en inglés. Voy a hacer switch a ese idioma. So, Professor Alex Slocum is our speaker this afternoon. He's the Pappalardo Professor of Mechanical Engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, also Faculty Teaching Fellow and Fellow of ASME. He has more than 100 patents and has helped develop 12 products that have received Research and Development 100 awards for one of the 100 best new technical products of the year. He has helped start several successful companies and has a passion for working with industry to solve real problems and identify fundamental research topics. Alex was the Massachusetts professor for the year 2000 and is the recipient of the Society of Manufacturing Engineering's Freddie Taylor Research Medal. ASME Leonardo da Vinci, Matching Design, and Third Energy Awards also. As Lee mentioned earlier, his current interest focuses on the development of precision machines, from medical devices and instruments to energy harvesting and storage machines. Recently, he served on the science team working for the Gulf oil spill and has served in the Office of Science and Technology Policy of the Executive Office of the President of the United States. Since high school days, Alex has a passion for furniture making, carpentry also, and also loves sports from scuba to snowboarding to marathons and iron distance triathlons. So he's going to give a presentation on symbiotic systems for the future of energy, water, and food. Alex.
Thank you. Let me just start out way back. So my mother was a mathematician, my father was a physicist, and grew up in the countryside. So I always learned before you do anything, think and ask yourself, what is the most sensitive variable parameter? How do you get the biggest impact for what you do? Oh, and I apologize, my Spanish is just micro, so I have to give this in English. Maybe one day I'll be able to do the whole thing in Spanish. That's my goal. My wife is an electrical engineer. She teaches robotics. And we have a small farm we live on that I often bring students to work. And that's why I'm wearing this shirt. My wife makes all my shirts. And this one has chickens on it. And chickens are very, very important for the future of the planet. Why in the United States, in any city, even in New York City, you can own chickens? And no law can tell you you cannot own a chicken. Why is that? Because during World War II, when protein was very scarce, everybody was told to have chickens because chickens make protein from everything that's left over. So as long as there's no mold on it, because mold will kill a chicken, but chickens are smart. They're really stupid, but they're not so stupid they eat mold. They eat everything else and they make protein. The best protein you can get is in eggs. The scientists who say, oh, cholesterol, they're all stupid. And it's been proven now, eggs are the best protein. So we let our chickens run around our little farm, and they eat all the bugs, so we have no bugs in the grass, and we don't have to spray the trees because the chickens eat all the bugs. Now the hawks and the foxes will eat the chickens, so we have sheepdogs, big dogs, Great Pyrenees, that will keep all the foxes and the hawks away from the chickens, because the rooster, when he sees a hawk, goes caw, caw, and the dogs come running. So everybody works together. And that's what I mean by symbiotic. The chickens eat the bugs, they poop and fertilize, they make eggs, we eat the eggs, everybody works together. So this is what I believe is the future of technology in industry, is not an isolated company that's optimized to do just this, but this company thinking and carefully working with that company, so together 1 + 1 = 3. That's our goal. 1 + 1 = 3, at least. If you're lucky, you can get 4. And the way we do that, and we want to approach that, is this. Whenever you're sad, think about what makes you glad. When I visit a company, I listen. And I listen for the people saying, oh, God, So you listen for people complaining. People who are saying, oh, this is so wonderful, are of no use. I want to know what makes you upset. Like I just broke my little pointer. So maybe this is where laser pointers came out. But notice this is my mechanical laser pointer. Okay? And when you understand what makes people unhappy, that tells you what you can design to make them happy, which is usually just the opposite. Okay? So let's go back to the analog. Let's see if this works. There we go. So there's a very famous movie called Ghostbusters. Anybody ever see Ghostbusters? Yeah. Dogs and cats living together implies that it's unhappy, but we all know that dogs and cats actually can live together very nicely, right? And everybody always puts up a slide when they talk about the environment of the Earth being in trouble. Well, this is if we're really in trouble, so let's not do that. Okay, that's my job in life, is to figure out how to work with people to understand machines to make the planet happy. And how do we do that? Well, we'll start with Dr. Seuss. Everybody knows Dr. Seuss? Cat in the Hat. Did people know this guy? Okay, well, it's very important you read Dr. Seuss. Now, I'll ask a question. How many people here one day want to have children? You know, little things? And how many people have heard that you cannot have your career and be a wonderful, successful professor if you have children or too much time playing with children? We've all heard that. So you know how I did it? We have 3 sons. They're all grown up now. They went to MIT. They're all geeks. Dr. Seuss. Because the way most of my technical papers and ideas that were done when I was a young man, professor, I didn't put the children aside so I could do work. I brought the children in to do work because little ones ask really stupid, good questions. And I did most of my early work on big sheets of paper. You know, you can buy newsprint really cheap. And instead of working on my desk, go away, kid, I would get down on the floor with big sheets of paper and crayons, you know, the good old crayons. And I would do all my theoretical work, my machine designs, in lots of color with my kids. So even when I lecture now at the board, often when I draw a gear, I have a smiley face in the gear. By combining systems from your own personal life and how you work to the actual work you do with, if I'm working with this company, you'll see in a minute, I also work with that company, you can make 1 + 1 = 2. So if you want to have a family, no problem. You can have a family and a career. It works great as long as you do it on the floor with crayons and color. So, and read Dr. Seuss. Look at the message he says here. Okay? And I will write rhymes to explain to my little kids, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, about what I'm doing on gear design or contact stress or very complicated mathematics. I would write very simple rhymes to explain to the kids the philosophy of what Daddy was working on. And I would often find either mistakes in what I was doing, which I would fix, or I would then understand better what I was doing by communicating to the very young ones what you do. So it's a very, very powerful catalyst for you to figure out. And that comes in very important here in a minute. We'll show you for machine design. So I like to start from the very simple, big picture and then and try to identify where I want to go. And then I will figure out the machine that'll take me there. Okay, now let's do this little thought experiment. Back in 2001, remember there was this event 9/11. And that was in September. And in November, I was in Egypt 2 months later at a conference where it turns out of 150 people, I was the only white guy who came. Everyone else canceled because they were afraid. And I started asking myself some questions. I met people in the local culture and stuff and what's going to happen. I'm a big fan of history, see? So now you look back in history at what societies do. And I did a quick calculation from our Vietnam War forward where we're going to spend the money. And I predicted back then, based on these very quick calculations, that we would spend 10 years and $2 trillion on this escapade. And we did. We actually spent $3 trillion. So I figured out back then, and I wrote on my leaders, that before you spend 10 years and $2 trillion, what would you do with $2 trillion? I want everyone to write down now. What would you do the calculation. What would you do with $2 trillion? Think about it. And this is an exercise. I want you to write it down in the next minute or two, and then at the end we're going to share it by whatever you're going to do with $2 trillion, whatever Paolo's going to do $2 trillion. You're going to then look at which you're going to swap, and you're each going to see what you did. And you're going to write comments on what you think about her idea for $2 trillion. Okay? Now, there are, 17 million people in Chile? So about a 20th of the population of the United States, roughly-ish. So what is 2 trillion divided by 20? 100 billion, right? Isn't that right? So let's change it. What would you do as the president of Chile with $100 billion? Okay, we'll change the number for you guys. You have $100 billion and 10 years to make your country the best country that anybody could possibly imagine, okay? That's your job. Everybody clear? And people in the home audience, you too. Maybe the El Presidente is watching, and so he'll figure this one out, right? Okay? What I did is I said at the time that back then, I could have roughly $4, I think I had $4 a watt, right? Yeah. I said at the time it cost $4 a watt for renewable energy. For $2 trillion, I could have 600 gigawatts of power in 10 years. Do you know how much power that is? That is the entire electrical needs of the United States. So I said in 2001, instead of going to war, let's spend $2 trillion in 10 years, and in 10 years, our entire country will be totally 100% renewable energy for all electricity. Isn't that fun? That's what we could have done. Instead, we didn't. But there's still the next 10 years. And think what that would have done for the environment, right? That's what I want you guys to think big. And then people, when I say this, says, yeah, well, even if you said you want to do it, you could never build that much renewable power anyway. You know, you can't do that. And you know what I say? I can design a machine that can do that. Because history shows that whenever there is a need and there's money, I can create a machine to automate it infinitely fast. And we're going to show you that machine here in a minute for wind power. It's really fun. Because history also shows and physics shows energy is the key to everything. You can't do anything without energy. Water, mining, food, anything. Energy is the absolute key. And if you combine the energy, like solar farms with wind storage, offshore wind with aquaculture, offshore wind, uranium harvesting, you can see the list here of there's many different ways we can get the costs even lower. Okay, so we want to explore some of those. The other thing to think about is when you do technology, and I won't really go into much more on this here, but you also have to think about policy. And think about not only policy, big picture items like look what China was able to do in 10 years. They went from nothing to one of the greatest economic powers for a little while. Now they have some issues. But how about consumers? What can consumers do? And you have this wonderful new facility here for the Fab Lab prototyping, right? So now consumers maybe are no longer going to be these passive things that just go to stores and buy. Maybe consumers are now the new creators and producers of technology. How can you harvest that for the environment that is uniquely Chile? Okay? So let's dive into the technology now. And how I was able to apply some of these philosophies to different technologies and what we're doing now. So the first thing is solar energy, and there's two flavors of solar energy. There is the photovoltaic, and we'll go into what we can do with that in a minute. But the biggest problem with photovoltaic is the sun is not always shining or a cloud comes over. So the other form of solar energy is solar thermal, of which there are two types. One is hot water heating, which is actually the best use of solar energy. But there's also solar thermal for how do I capture and store the sun's energy so I can use it at nighttime. And then I use that hot, whatever it is, salt or oil, to create steam, and then a classic steam turbine cycle. And around the world, there was very early on some very good work done. You see they're called power towers, these big, tall towers that the sun mirrors are beamed up to the towers, like I show a picture of a tower up there. And when you look at a picture of these solar energy stations, you'll see a very bright light at the tower. Now, there's you got to ask yourself, what's the physics of that? Why is that bright light there? If I can see something really bright and hot, is that getting rid of energy or is it taking energy in? Well, it turns out that these power towers, as they're called, are horribly inefficient. And I went through and did what's called an energy budget, where you look at all the energy that's coming in, all the energy that's coming out, and what is the physics of that collection of energy and of going in and out. And you find out that the reason the power towers are so bad is because they are designed to take the full energy of the sun when it's brightest and hottest at noon or 1 o'clock, or they're designed to take the energy of the sun only in the late morning and mid-afternoon, and when the sun is really hot, it'll melt the power tower, so they have to dump some of the energy. In other words, you can't make a tower that can take the energy during the entire spectrum of the sun During the day, it'll be too expensive. Okay, so when you see this really bright, they're dumping some of the energy. That's the way it is, right? So I asked the question, the inverse question. Remember the first slide where I show 1 over sadness equals happiness? That's the principle of reciprocity. And the principle of reciprocity mathematically means something in terms of Maxwell and how you apply that for signal analysis. That's a different form. But the principle of reciprocity for design thinking is whenever something that you're doing is not giving you good, try the opposite. Has anybody here ever been sleeping on their back and wasn't comfortable? So what did you do? Yeah, you turn over and sleep on your stomach. So if a big tower is not giving you solar thermal happiness, you should not use a tower. Duh. If sending fluid through kilometers of pipes where you heat the pipe with the sun, but then every now and then one of those hundreds or thousands of welds that are made in the pipe breaks and you got to shut down the whole tower, if that doesn't give you happiness, you should not use pipes. So what this is, let's see if the laser works. See, look what a lame laser. Anyway, that's hot salt. That actually is 1,000-degree sodium chloride salt. I took that picture at my heat treaters. I actually still do machine design part drawings, and I still make some of my own parts. And that's actually at my heat treater friends. And I noticed, I can see through that. So the philosophy here is instead of a tower, we'll use a tub. And the red stuff here is molten salt. And instead of trying to collect the sunlight by having it heat a tube, which then heats salt on the inside of the tube, let's just have the sunlight go bloop right through the salt itself and let the salt absorb. So I'm a scuba diver. And if you ever notice, up near the surface, everything's nice colors. But as you go deeper, it's blue because all the reds get absorbed at the top layer of water. And the numbers work out very nice because now what we're going to do is we're going to put the mirrors on the hills and then beam the light down into the little bucket here. Now your first reaction may be, oh, but it's too expensive to put mirrors on the hills. They're steep. Yeah, but no one wants the hills. Agriculture uses the flat land. The hills are cheap. Oh, but it's so hard to climb the hill and put something. Design a machine to climb the hill. The first Caterpillar tractors are actually designed to operate on steep hills over 100 years ago. And it turns out now there's a German company called Krina. And they put in all their solar fields they have these little tracked vehicles guided by GPS, and they just drive along the ground, donk, 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 putting things in. And tracked vehicles can go up hills real nice. So we can automate the whole thing. So this is what we believe is the future of solar thermal, that the sunlight heats the salt up. This gray thing is a divider between the top of the tank and the bottom of the tank. The hot salt is always taken from the top that goes to the steam generator. After the steam generator, the cold salt, which is still molten, goes in the bottom. So at nighttime, this door is closed, and as you're extracting salt, more hot salt, and you're making steam, and you're putting in the bottom, this gray divider plate moves up. During the day, when you have more energy from the sun coming in than you're making steam, this gray divider plate is moving down as you're not putting so much. You see here that the side, the cold salt comes up and gets heated up again. So this is a machine we're building in Abu Dhabi. That's where I was all last week. It's a 25 kilowatt test machine. All the parts actually fit just according to the drawings. It was a lot of fun. And we'll actually be turning it on in about a month when I'm back. So we're pretty excited. And it scales very nicely to the many multi-megawatt size. In this article we published on this, we went through and with some mapping people, some geology friend mapping people who are very good at maps, we went through and we looked at desert sites. There's 2 sites in the southwest, it's called the United States, White Sands and China Lake. And those are military sites where they practice blowing stuff up. And they have a lot of hills and mountains. So they don't blow stuff up on the hills, they do targets in the valleys. So we looked and said, on these areas, what could we use hillsides that actually would be perfect for this solar insolation? And what we found was on this little bit of the land, those two sites could give us 20 gigawatts of electric power. 24/7, so continuous. How much is 20 gigawatts? What can that do for people? Does anybody want to guess what the average power consumption of a person is in a developed, like in here, in a developed country with great standard of living? How much power do you use on average during the day? What's your average power consumption? Want to guess?
Chile is about 8,000 megawatts.
For everybody?
No, that's a Chilean power.
Okay.
Yeah, divide by 15 million.
Okay, so that's what, 600 watts? Okay. Yeah, in the United States, it'll be 500 to 600 gigawatts for roughly 300 people, so the number is 2 kilowatts. Okay, so in the United States, if we put this, and these are only a couple hundred miles from Los Angeles, so 20 gigawatts. Oh, and by the way, that's on each one, so I have 40 gigawatts total. 40 gigawatts divide by 2 kilowatts. What's that? So it's always best to go to exponentials, right? 40 giga is 40 times 10 to the 9th divided by 2 times 10 to the 3. That's 20 times 10 to the 6th. Did I do that right? 20 million people. All of Los Angeles and San Diego, all of those people could have 100% renewable energy by just using little itty-bitty parts of bombing ranges. Isn't that cool? So this is one of the things when I worked in the White House 2 years ago, I like, hello people, wake up, look what you can do. And they're like, dude. So we hope this will actually happen. In other words, when people whine about the environment and the Paris Convention, which was a very good thing, it's too expensive. I say, what's the Spanish word for bull? They just need to think more happy. Okay, let's go to wind. So wind offshore in the United States is potentially a very big thing because we have fantastic wind along the coast and it's not too deep. Some places it's very deep. And energy storage is the big issue. So here we're going to looking at offshore wind turbines. And what our goal was how do we store the excess energy? And it turns out if the water is deep, 500-600 meters, which you get off the coast of California, everybody's heard of pumped hydro or hydroelectric dams. We're just moving the dam of water. Instead of using water, we're using air, and we're putting it all the way down under the water deep. And we originally showed it with big, giant spheres, but it turns out that these long pipes, just 2-meter diameter concrete pipes, if you connect all the wind turbines hydrostatically with these pressure lines under the ocean, you can store all the excess energy that the wind turbines generate, which means when the wind is light and the demand is high, you can let the water rush back into the tubes through the turbine and generate quite a lot of power. So we can store all the energy we need to from the wind turbines with these underwater systems. The other thing we're looking at is aquaculture. And around the world, like you probably have heard, the shrimp farms off the coast of Vietnam are wrecking the environment. And one of the problems with aquaculture is the fish need water. That's why they're fish. And if you put these big ponds for the fish near the coastline where it's cheap because you can get to them easy, you have to give them a lot of antibiotics, and it's very bad for them. You want them to be ideally off in the deep water where when fish do that other thing that fish do other than eat and make more fish, it just falls deep in the water. I'm not allowed to use bad words like poo, I think. So. But it's too expensive to put them far offshore because the structure to hold them is too much. But what if I already have a structure out there? And there's a professor in Germany who's also, he's one of the big pioneers of this, for looking in the North Sea where they're putting vast quantities of wind turbines. So now let's also have offshore fish farms, and then the whole thing of automated robotics, automated systems via robotic tending of the fish farms comes to light too. Fantastic new potentials. Okay, remember I told you earlier about machines and wind. So when remember how I mentioned earlier, one of the things I like to do is understand where the money is. What's the cost? Because if I know where something is really expensive, I can design a new machine. And this happened a few years ago. I was asked to be a consultant on a project for this very wealthy investor who had a brilliant new idea for a gearbox for a wind turbine, and because I do a lot of gear design. And I was hired to come in and look at this design, and I said, brilliant design, go! I know why no one's ever thought of it before. You can't do it. The physics is wrong, sadly. The gears would just go and break off. And he says, well, what should I do with my money? I want to invest in wind. How can we make the biggest impact? I said, I have no idea. Let's go. It's called NREL, National Renewable Energy Labs. And they have all kinds of wonderful data. And we looked there, and there was a nice pie chart of where the money is and the costs are in wind turbines. And the big wind turbines, 3 to 5 megawatts and more, the biggest money is in the generator, gearbox. It's the pole, the boring chunk of steel. Because you have like 400 tons of steel. And he was like, there's no technology in that. Goodbye. Boom, left. He was a nice guy, actually, because we came up with the idea for the machine that we need. And he says, I don't want any part of it, but you guys own it, do what you want. The problem is the physics. The reality. Maybe it's the next slide. Nope. Sorry about that. The physics, the reality. These poles are only 4¼ meters on the diameter, so you can bring them in on a truck underneath a bridge. So if you have this big tall pole with a big wind turbine up here going pushing on the pole and it wants to break off, and you only got 4 meters on the base, it needs to be really thick, like 3 to 4 centimeters sometimes, and even higher, 5 to 7 centimeters thick steel, very expensive, and it gets very, very heavy. So if you ask yourself the physics question, or the mechanics and materials question, how do I minimize the weight, which means minimize the cost? Turns out you want the base to be 7 to 8 meters in diameter and only 20 to 25 millimeters thick. But you can't build it. You can't make this thing and bring it to the site. So what's the opposite of that? Make it on the site. Everybody knows that. But you can't, there's no machines that exist to do that. Well, I know, we'll figure out how to make little pieces and bolt them together, and everybody goes, roar, and the whole herd goes running off in this direction. I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make a machine. So we invented a machine. This is the actual machine, and it worked first time. This is the 1/7 scale model. We're now building the full machine. And the idea is that you take the machine apart, with the constriction is the machine has to fit in a standard shipping container or multiple. You bring them to site, you stick them together, you turn them on, and it welds continually. We figured out the mathematics of how to weld a spiral taper tower. They make pipe this way now. That's a pipe mill, but you can't taper it. So we're really excited. We built our first tower and installed it. It's 1 meter diameter and 33 meters tall on a 20 kilowatt turbine to prove the effort. The math works out, and now we're building the big machine. And the numbers still continue to hold up, that when we build this on a site, the first 5 towers pay for the cost of the entire setup, and everything after that you're printing money. And lowers the cost of the pole because we use 1/3 as much steel. The cost of wind energy can now be reduced by 10%, which is huge. That looks like it'll be the tipping point. And where will we use this thing? Well, if you look at sites around the world, there's really excellent wind in places, and then there's places that aren't so excellent. In the United States looks kind of like a cow. And the upper, the head of the cow is where I live in Maine, in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine. Okay, and the state of Maine has very few people in it, only a few 100,000, yet it's huge because there's vast quantities of forest there. And the forests were owned for the pulp and paper industries, but no one wants paper anymore, and they're trying to figure out what to do with Maine. Well, it turns out that Maine is lousy for wind. There's maybe 6 gigawatts of wind potential in Maine, period, total, and that's on the higher ridges. If I can make you a 140-meter tall pole, almost the whole state is perfect for wind because now I'm way above all those trees. Now Maine has 60 gigawatts of wind potential. 60. That's the ability to provide power for 30 million people, the entire northeast of the United States. All because we created a machine that can make the pole on site for cheap. And it uses a steel from the sheet mill, not the plate mill. And sheet mill steel is very, very cheap these days. So we're really excited. See what a little funny machine can do. You can have so much fun. So here's the other thing that's interesting is nuclear energy. Oh, and by the way, there's a children's book series that you must read. Because remember how I was saying if you do this, you do this, you do this, you do that? That comes from a very famous book, at least in the United States. It's called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. And I'm pretty sure it's been translated into Spanish. So if you have young children or engineers or anybody, get If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. You must do this. You trust me. Or for really big problems, if you give a moose a muffin. So here's this pesky offshore wind turbine again. It's too expensive. Offshore wind is too expensive. Oh, not if you raise fish with it, by the way. You almost double your return on investment. But there's another interesting thing. For nuclear power, there's about 100 years worth of uranium left on the terrestrial that's known and easy to get. If you go to offshore, there's about 100,000 years of uranium in the seawater. It's how to get it. Now the polymers are being developed and they're getting really good. And the Department of Energy folks asked me, say, Alex, you kind of come up with some interesting machines. Figure out how we can deploy the polymer. It looks like big rope. So what we did is we came up with, hey, go to the offshore wind turbine, and now we'll make a system where the rope goes up and down, just all the way around, like rigging. And this is the scale model, by the way. This is the scale. That's a 5 megawatt turbine. And this is 100 meters here. And what we're doing is we have a total of 4 kilometers worth of rope here. And for that 5 megawatt turbine, the amount of uranium this rope will gather as it winds goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And once a month, it goes through these special tanks of a mild acid that strip the uranium off. You generate the equivalent, enough uranium to power 5 megawatts worth of power in an onshore reactor. So in other words, a tower that was designed to give me 5 megawatts of power from wind now actually harvests a total of 10 megawatts of energy, 5 from the uranium you harvest and 5 from the wind. So we're pretty excited about that too. And on our costs for this that we're estimating, the uranium from this system will be around $300 a kilo. Terrestrial uranium is around, the spot price is typically around 100. But the availability of this is something that, forecasting the future, the government, the DOE modelers say that's good. Work to get it down more, but that was the sweet spot. So that was an exciting development. Now, I'm also working a lot with big oil. I'm a hydrocarbon guy. I like my diesel tractor. So I spent a number of years, and I still do, working with Schlumberger. These are directional drill bits. I was able to make it so you can go many kilometers longer, hotter, and deeper, which is one of the reasons why we have the problem in the oil industry, because oil got so cheap, because we made it so you can get it really simple, and a lot of the fracking tools. But the interesting story is that these same technologies that let us go long, big, hot, deep, horizontal bores for the oil industry to get all that oil and gas, turns out that that's what you need to bury the nuclear waste. I know nuclear power is a very sensitive topic in a lot of places. A lot of it's because of the waste. Turns out that if you drill a hole, we show here with these numbers, you can put all the waste for that reactor right underneath the reactor in deep rock. So the next generation of nuclear technology that is coming out, they still have the waste issue, and this is a big project with the Department of Energy. The new test boreholes are just being built now. So in the future, you'll see that a nuclear reactor is to be built where there is hard, deep, boring rock. Boring as in there's no water. And this is where the oil industry has a real potential, because the oil industry is good at finding oil, but they're really good at finding no oil. So they have the technology. Deanna, the lady who's here, the geotech, she was showing us earlier some of the neat work she was doing. Same kind of philosophy, is figure out, map the underground. Okay, now let's get to the last part and some fun stuff, what we're doing with pumped hydro and water, and call it the AFRO system. Advanced pumped hydro and reverse osmosis. So a lot of places you have to make water by reverse osmosis, which is expensive. You need electricity and you need capital equipment, big pumps to pressurize the water. And what we're doing here is we're saying, the best way to store large amounts of energy is by pumping water up a hill to a big lake, and then when you need the water, it comes back down the hill. And that's round-trip efficiency 80% or more. And there's actually a group of Valhalla Energy that we'll be talking to, I guess, Friday, that has a nice plant planned, about 100 kilometers south of Iquique, I think it is. It turns out when the universe was created and something designed Earth and the universe, it was designed intelligently. You know how I know? This is a good story. It's over a few beers we can talk about later. But the way I know is that on the 6th day, Federal Express, UPS, Amazon, and McMaster, that's the parts company I buy, were created. So that means you only have 5 days to make everything, because the 6th day you got to make the really important stuff, right? So you got to cut some corners. So that means when you're designing physics and particles and all this stuff, you say, wait a second, I know. I'm going to make the optimal pressure for operating a Francis turbine so it can be reversible flow, so it doesn't cavitate 50 atmospheres, 500 meters of height. Oh, by the way, we're going to make the density of water such that 10 meters of depth equals 1 atmosphere, because that also makes it simpler so I can do everything in 5 days. It turns out, oh my goodness, now I got to figure out osmotic pressures in chemistry. No time. Let's just make 50 atmospheres a really great pressure for running my osmotic pressure for my RO plant. 2 for 1, same thing. That's the only way I could look at it. So it turns out that when you design an RO plant, you need pumps that can give you 50 to 70 atmospheres of pressure at least. And when you're designing a hydroelectric plant, you get the optimal efficiency, so maximum return on investment, if you have a lake that is 500 to 700 meters above the lower lake. Everybody know what a Reese's peanut butter cup is? Chocolate and peanut butter. 2 great tastes in 1 candy bar. So I don't need to buy any pumps if I take my RO plant and I put it right next to my pumped hydro plant. Now, another big cost of RO, reverse osmosis, is that after you take the fresh water out, what are you left with? Salt water. And you can't just splue the salt water back into the ocean because it's so concentrated. Oops, sorry. Because you see what happens? You cause an environmental nightmare and you make someone unhappy. You'll kill all the fish and you'll kill everything. So I need 2 kilowatts of power average over 24 hours, which is 50 kilowatt hours of energy. M, G, H, mass times gravity times height equals energy times efficiency of about 0.8. H is going to be 500 meters. G is 10. 9.8, but in the metric system you can. The mass of the water to give me all the 2 kilowatts I need turns out to be about 20 cubic meters. For 20 cubic meters of water up here, whoosh, coming down through over 24 hours, I'll give you all your electricity you want. I need about 500 liters of water a day for my personal consumption and for the agriculture and the other uses associated with water associated with me. That takes about a cubic meter of water. So I'm left with a 0.5 cubic meter of toxic brine but I get with it 20 cubic meters of water that whoosh, went through the turbine to give me my power. So I have a 40-to-1 dilution, which makes that toxic brine no longer toxic, and then I can just put it in the ocean here without hurting anybody. So I now get rid of the cost of the long, very expensive outflow line I need. Kind of cool, huh? So we can lower the cost of reverse osmosis produced water by about 20 to 30%, we believe. It's pretty exciting, just by co-locating the two. And what does that mean in terms of areas? We have spreadsheets and numbers, and we want to go there. Let's go to the visual. So we went around the world doing mapping of what does that mean? Where could you do this around the world? Because you have to have high mountains near coastline and people. So we went and we showed in Lanai and Hawaii. They have very little people there, but we put that up because Mr. Ellison owns the island, so he may want this. The more exciting thing is around California, where I grew up. In Malibu and San Clemente, we went and mapped out what would be the sizes of the lakes needed to store all the energy we need to allow renewables to flourish everywhere, assuming you weren't doing the solar thermal thing, and also make all the water that you could need. Because remember, California is a big water problem. So very, very viable, easy to do. And if the Californians don't want to do it because they I don't want anything in my backyard. They grow a lot of bananas in Southern California. Do you know what those are? Basically, absolutely nothing, nowhere, anyhow, never. That's how the acronym goes. It's even worse than a NIMBY. But in Mexico, it turns out that just across the border in Tijuana, there is fantastic afro capability. So look at the scale here. This is about 10 kilometers from the coast, up here high in the mountains. Really fantastic. This is actually almost 800 to 900 meters. And if I look at the size of this square here, this square would provide all the power and fresh water for about 20 million people. So you would never make a lake that big. So the message we're working with some friends in Mexico, some big industrialists, is you could now they now buy all their power from California. You guys could turn into the people who sell all the power and water to Southern California. They'll have to build a wall here to keep the Californians out. And now we go around the world. Morocco, fantastic potential. And the country of Morocco is trying to become a renewable energy hub. So we went through and did the mapping in Morocco. I do a fair amount of work in the United Arab Emirates. This is where our SALT, the CS Pond solar energy machine is. And if you look at the west coast here, this is Fujairah. This is the state of Fujairah. In the United Arab Emirates, you've heard of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Well, Fujairah wants to become a big local, wonderfulness hub. And I want it to be that way because they have some of the world's best scuba diving in the Indian Ocean here, so I need to be able to go here. And anyway, this block here, you can see the size of this thing. This is about 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers. This would provide power and water for 20 million people. The population of Dubai is about 15 million. So we're very excited there. And then in this part of the world, which has some interest in this is fantastic scuba diving in here. And the Red Sea, this is over in Egypt, or Eilat in Israel. Or the best thing is right here near Aqaba. Basically, this type of areas, we can provide all the fresh water and electricity needed for all of Jordan, about 15 million people. And then now here's the really exciting, interesting thing. This country. So one of my co-researcher authors on this is an Iranian fellow, Sasan. Here's Tehran, about 100 kilometers away, 120 kilometers away on the Caspian Sea. They have the capability in these mountains, very high mountains here, to provide all the fresh water and energy for over 60 million people. The entire population of Iran, which has huge freshwater crises. So part of what we're trying to work delicately is Iran could become the center of Afro technology for the Middle East, for example. And they're not going to need nuclear because you can now afford to have fresh water and all the power, all with wind and solar. So that's one of my bigger society type goals. All made possible by just being aware of where the costs are and where the pains are, and then what machines we need to do it. That's the moral of the story. So I'll skip forward a little bit, and here is a model for how we want to start. So the Crown Prince of Jordan has this vision of a water park, like for fun, near Aqaba. And talking with Lee, I'm learning a lot about, he knows a lot about ancient water technology. And everybody knows about Disney, like Disneyland or Disney World. So they have this thing in Disney World called Epcot Center, which is this interesting lake. Look at the scale of the lake. It's about 1 kilometer across. And around the lake, there's this pathway that you can walk, and it has different countries represented. So it's really popular for, you learn about the whole world. So the Crown Prince wants to do a similar-ish thing. So our vision-ish idea is, the center of the lake is the big, deep Afro well. Around it, you can even have a water park fun of shallower water where you can splash and play in. And then around that, your Epcot Center-like theme park. So that's what we're actively working on now. That's where I was last week. Last week I was in Israel, Jordan, and then Abu Dhabi, and then I flew here last night. So that's why I'm a little bit not sure which time zone. But that's what we're working on. It's really exciting. And in the end, it's going to need new automated earth-moving equipment. Because you know these big lakes we're talking about? You guys have the mining technology for moving lots of rock and dirt. And a lot of it's being automated. And to get the cost down, when the world is going to be building these Afro lakes, they're going to go, where in the world is the world's best technology and people who know how to do mapping of sites and moving large amounts of dirt around to make these big lakes? Where is that, maybe? So you can see all these happy sites we've done. We've mapped out where to put these things. And this is a fun one. How many people here like to drink coffee with like 6 creams and 19 sugars? I used to be like that. This is me. See up there? I was a biggin. And then when I turned 40, my doctor, she peels off her veterinary glove and she says, "You're in a world of hurt, boy. You're going to die soon." And I said, "What can I do?" She says, "Exercise." So I went a little crazy. I do long-distance triathlons now. I really love it. But if you look at the amount of money we spend on, I call them foo-foo coffees, these coffees with all this stuff in them. And I learned humans don't change well all at once. They change best a little bit at a time. Dinner, hugging, a little bit of kissing, 3 boys. It's amazing how fast it happens. So if you just slowly change, so it took me about a year to go from foo-foo coffee to black coffee. That's all I drink now is black coffee. And if you look at the amount of coffee sold and the amount you save on drugs, and actually in the United States, every day there are 24 giant trucks of body fat being generated. Isn't that amazing? It turns out that in 50 years, if you take the savings from not spending money on the foo-foo coffee and not spending money on all the drugs that are associated, statins and stuff associated with heart health, and spend it instead on renewable energy, in 50 years, you can have, look how much power. You could have 250 gigawatts of renewable energy. Isn't that amazing? If a little bit of money is just redirected through slow changes in public thinking, the entire world can have all the renewable energy it wants, and we won't have a crisis. But it takes you guys, especially the young pups out there, to tell your politicians, or like, "Hey, dudes, let's do this." Okay? So it's always, you get more flies with honey than vinegar, remember? All right, so last, because I went over, I'm sorry, but it's metric time. And no one's asleep yet. So this is what I think. The future can be really pretty. There's this beautiful canvas of life. But it takes the engineers, the scientists, the politicians, everyone working together to paint that future. It'll only be beautiful like this if we work together. Otherwise, it won't be so much fun. But I think fun is better than non-fun, so we should do it. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Alex, for this great talk and very inspiring also. We do have some time for questions or remarks, comments.
Or let's hear that. I have questions for them if they're going to be shy. Let's just pick some people and say, remember we said you got 100 billion? What was the number we had again? 100 billion, I think, right? Over 10 years?
Yes.
Instead of, yeah, so who wants to go first? What would you do with $100 billion over the next 10 years as president of Chile?
Education, education, and education.
Good. All right. That's the first one. That was a good one. Because people will figure it out if you give them the opportunity and you teach them.
Yes.
Okay? So let's figure that. Let's go one step. So 100 billion divided by 10 years, so that's 10 billion a year. Is that right? We could spend on education?
That is too much.
So, yeah, so we could do a lot more even than education. We could do education and a lot of good stuff.
But I would start with that.
I agree with you on that. Anybody else want to suggest something?
There.
Ah, yes, sir.
Science and technology.
Okay, a little more specific. Education or
High-level technology to develop an industry in Chile, because in Chile we just have our economy is based on copper mining.
mhm.
So once we run out of copper, we will have no choice to carry on with our economy. So we need to develop high technology industry.
Okay, I hear you just got some lithium too. So lithium batteries would be an excellent one, right? Okay, so let me ask you this question. How long will your copper last? Do they guess?
I don't know.
Fif-
50, 100 years.
Okay, so why do you export copper? It's really stupid if you think about it, to export copper. What does the world do with your copper?
Wire.
Yeah, so why don't you export wire? Or even better, the next generation, all vehicles are going to be electric within 20 years. So you guys should not even be exporting wire. You should be exporting electric motors.
Of course.
So, yeah. So the man has it that the history of the world shows that if you export machinery, yeah, dude. So you young guys here, you all start thinking about what are the sizes of the electric motors that cars of the future and even now want, and start looking at the electric motor design. And you go back in history to the dudes of electricity in the late 1800s and early 1800s, Siemens and folks who created the whole electric generator and motor industry world. They did it from nothing. So you now can grab the future right now and start thinking about what is the optimal motor. Let's go to Nissan and say, Nissan, I work very closely with Nissan. What are the motors that your Leafs use? Why don't you buying them from China now? Why not make them in Chile? Look, CH, the same two first letters. It makes sense. The same first three letters. Dudes. That's your future. And then design the machine, because I've seen the motor factories in China. There's still a lot of labor involved in them. You can make them with machinery to they're 100% automated. Okay, so that's the challenge. I'm going to be back here in a couple years. I'll be back before then a bunch. But in a few years, I'll be listening to you all saying, in Spanish, and hopefully I'll understand then, this is how we took over the world's electric motor industry for the cars. How's that for a vision, eh? Mm-hmm. Okay, next. Come on. Yes, sir.
Strengthening the cities in the south and in the north with more immigration. I mean, we're too little population. I don't know, 10 million more people from all over the world.
How about bring in some Syrians? No, and I say that very seriously. They're very good people. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. Yeah, you need people. They're very good people, very industrious, and particularly in the desert climates, they're right at home. What's really stupid in the United States is bringing in Syrians and sending them to New Hampshire or Minnesota. It is, because it's snow. And well, I know some of these guys are like, this is really stupid. Why do they put us here? Yeah, okay, so that's talk to your representatives. Bring some in. And then you should have a talk with your mom about how this works. If you want to make more people. He's blushing, it's so cute.
We need a lot more than that's too slow.
Okay, someone else. I'll pick on Paula because I was already picking earlier. Okay, what do you can do with your money?
I don't know. For the country or for me?
No, for the country. You couldn't spend 100 billion if you tried. You couldn't spend $1 billion.
I can teach you how to expand it. I can aid you in that.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Anybody else, or we're good, okay? So the immigration was a very good one. Electric motors, do it. Yes, sir.
I would forest the desert.
Ah, you need water for that when we talked about how you can do that, yeah.
Energy, but you have
Yeah.
that problem solved.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that's a good thing. Yeah, start foresting at least the mountain slopes, and yeah, that'd be really good. There was a lot of work that was done, and if you look back in the 1900s starting, the people wanted to start pumping vast quantities of fresh water into the Sahara. The Sahara used to be like the Amazon. So that sort of geoengineering is a really great idea. Okay, I like that one too. So I expect to go hunting in the forests, having gotten there on my new electric car. But don't do like they did in Scotland. In Scotland, and actually in parts of Iran, they went and they said, okay, what's the best, fastest growing tree? And they planted all the same tree, and then the bugs said, dude, and they ate them all down. So you got to do the diversity thing. It's a good thing. And in the United States now, we're really, the fir pine trees are getting eaten. Yeah.
Are you planning to do that in Chile? Do you have a project or something?
So we're talking to the Valhalla folks tomorrow, and hopefully and I'll learn a lot from them, and I don't know what's going to happen, but to start talking about the RO combo and maybe help them to do an experiment. The folks I'm working with in Jordan are very interested in one of my big goals is to get these people here in the Middle East to be talking to the Valhalla and folks in Chile about how to work together to build and operate the first system to get data on, and then you learn from that, so then it can be start repeating it around the world. So that's my goal. I'm here for the fun people and to talk to you guys, but I'm also here to specifically do that. We hope it can work. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Yes, I have one question. It's
Yes.
about the project that you're doing in Mexico about the, I don't know.
It's not started yet. We hope to do. We're talking to the people.
Yeah, that's the question. I don't know if you talk with the Federal Commission of Electricity about this, because in Mexico you have electricity, I don't know the word, but with solar systems, you cannot automize your house. You can do it only like 70% of your house, and the other percentage you have to take it from the Commission of Electricity. And I don't know, in that maybe the way that we do that kind of stuff is not.
So we have.
The government.
Well, we have the same problem.
I don't know if you talk with them, or I don't know the point of view of the Mexicans. If you talk.
Okay, so we have the same problem. That quote problem exists all around the world, by the way. That if people just put solar power in their homes and say, I don't need the grid, except when the solar power doesn't work, then who pays for the grid? It ends up just the poor people pay who can't afford so there's big social issues. The big giant Afro-centralized system we're talking about would be, that would help solve that problem because that gives storage. So it doesn't take away the need for the grid at all. And as a matter of fact, it enables you to have renewables. Here's the storage system, so a person on their house doesn't need renewables, actually. In other words, all the houses could have renewables, and the extra power can go into the grid and then pump the water up. The reason the utility doesn't want you to have so much solar is because they don't know what to do with it. So the reason to go with the western part of Mexico is twofold. One, around Tijuana and there, they don't actually have, that part of the grid is not connected to the rest of the country. It's a more isolated experiment, so to speak. So that's why we're starting there. And that is just like 2 months old discussions. So we'll see what happens. I also work on like medical devices and small little gizmos, by the way. Little things. And then I also work on big, giant things that may or may not ever go anywhere. So some of these may just be total dreams that nothing ever happens. But you got to aim really, really big. Otherwise, all you'll do is just little things. So, and that was a great, what you pointed out was a very, very important point about, as engineers, we know we can do this. It's the local politics. And yeah. Now, a friend of mine said, you'll never be able to do this in Los Angeles because, you know, the bananas and the NIMBYs will prevent it, and the people in Malibu with the expensive houses, you know, they'll never allow it. Well, a friend of mine, a former graduate student who I work a lot with on stuff, he grew up in Cleveland. His mother had him sleep in the bathtub because bullets would come through the door. You know, a really tough neighborhood. So my buddy, he was my student, now he's my good friend. We collaborate on a lot of stuff. His name is Mark Graham. And he's a rap artist also. He designs medical devices, but on the side he has a rap group. And I produced a rap album when I was younger with him. I didn't sing, I gave the money. And Mark said to me, hey, Alex, you know what's really funny about your system? He said, they're Afro. You know, like African American, the fuzzy hair thing. I said, oh, wow, how about that? He goes, we started thinking. So in Los Angeles, you've got 2 to 3 million people who have afros, who have no jobs, no hope, no future, and a lot of guns. And you got a few really rich people who will be saying, no, you can't have potential for jobs and renewables and stuff because we won't let you. So the social thing can also work for us, that there's a lot of people in cities who have nothing, no future, no hope, no nothing. But if you think about what it would take to build the factories, to operate the factories, to make the solar panels, to install the solar panels, to operate them, to run the mining equipment, to build the system, and you say, well, where does all this money come from? All the money comes from from the electricity that's generated. You know, you're mining the renewables as a resource base to pay for these social structures and changes. I think there's going to be the world's people are going to change. Oh, and we have a slide for that. Mark and I, mostly him, me with a few beers encouraging him, came up with, where is it? A rap. And you said, do I have video? No, but do I have the, where is it? Hey, come on. I don't know what I did with it. Oh. Do I have internet here? Don't look at all the junk on my screen. Is that it? No? Hold on, let's search this over here. I know I had it. I had it here earlier. Let me find it for you this way. So we came up with a rap, and on his website, if you go to polomeinstein.com, I believe it is, this is the rap. Anybody got on the internet here?
Here. Here's the guy.
Oh, I need the adapter to plug that in. Or does anybody got a laptop that'll plug in? How about the one that was here?
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is, the social is important.
I can share internet from my.
Did you find it?
No, but I have internet. I have a data plan.
Ah, he's got a data line. Or is this guy getting it?
No, he's going to.
Oh, he's going to get it. So Mark wrote the rap for this that we want to use rap. We want to use music, and in this case for Los Angeles and that genre, rap music, as a way to get the population excited about this and get stuff moving. And then the bananas, they'll have to peel out.
It should work right now.
Does it work now?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Let me try this. Oh, I know where I'll go find it directly.
No, 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 sí. Está buscando la dirección.
Whoa, it's working. Okay, so Mark has some pretty radical, thinking. These are all thinking songs. But this is, let's see if this will play. Will that play? Play. I guess it's streaming?
Maybe.
You get the picture. Maybe it'll all fill out, it'll buffer, and then it'll play, huh? I think that with technology, art and music are how young people can control the future. Pure technology can do wonderful things like, give us the internet, but the internet by itself is useless if it doesn't have people on it. Maybe when it finishes the whole thing, we'll go back and be able to do it. Okay, so anyway, if you want to hear it, by the way, you can see the website. I can send that to, can one of you guys read that? And then you can. Wait a second, we'll do it here. Can you read that? So write that down. I like classical music, country music, rap. I like it all. It's like a meal to me. So. And if you want to listen to something that'll make your hair curl in a good way, you also on his website want to listen to the song called Journey of... It's a story about slavery.
Maybe if you move it to the beginning.
I think it has to buffer everything in, and then we can hit from the beginning. You got the website, so you guys can do it in the privacy of your own home. But thanks for coming, and be thinking about what you're going to do to make Chile the greatest country on earth. Because if every country on earth thinks they're going to be the greatest country on the earth, and we all work in a positive way, the earth will be really, really, really much more fun. He's good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I hope I was okay.